You've heard a lot about Interfaith Alliance this evening, set in a context of a nation that needs to have strengthened the concerns that most of us bring to this room, and thus need people in this whole movement called Interfaith Alliance that will challenge the entanglement of government and religion and will try to protect our first freedom, which is the foundation for the democracy that we enjoy. I want to tell you that there is a lot to be concerned about and a lot that is negative that we could talk about, but that's not what I want to do for a second. I am sure, more sure than I have ever been, that religion can make a difference for good in our world. In the inception of all of our great religions, you find values that religions hold in common and values that can bring people together. People who take religion seriously can get along with people with whom they differ dramatically. Religion needs to return to its roots. We need to return to religion's roots and find there an appreciation for religious traditions that cause us to respect each other mutually and to work together over our disagreements and to give equal respect to those who don't hold religion as we do. Nothing else has worked, friends. Government can't do this. Multinational corporations can't do this. Political movements can't do this. And the truth is that up until now, except for a few times, religion has not done it. But it's because religion hadn't been tried at its authentic best. Even people who have decided against religion tell me from time to time they know that religion has a vision that is good for this nation and good for this world. I want you to know that despite the challenges of financial shortfalls and in the midst of a political environment that can make you depressed, talking about the vision of what can be in our nation and what is resident, latently at the heart of all of our religious traditions is a vision that for us is not just a prayer, not just a dream, but the work that we intend to do every day. Now, that said, as essential as money is to doing this work, money cannot supplant the importance of people, and that's why we're in this room tonight, to honor two very special people. Recently, in a sermon from a pulpit in another state, I spoke about the leaders of reform in the history of Christianity. Jane Holmes Dixon was a primary figure on the list of people that I read that morning. Jane's name is spoken with reverence in the offices of Interfaith Alliance, where young staff members saw her not dressed in clerical clothes and wearing symbols of her faith and not speaking in liturgical language, but as a friend and a fellow struggling human being. They're all morphed into respect and admiration and quickly to love. Even if I ever had wanted to say anything bad about Jane, which never has been the case, I couldn't have done it. I would have been critiquing a saint. Now, of course, Jane is a saint because she will argue vociferously that she's not. And it may well be that the real saint in the family is Dixie. I know that's what Jane would say. With admiration and a smile, Dixie told me one time that Jane is the only person he's ever known that insisted on having her nails done before going to a protest. Jane has done almost everything good that was unpopular and dangerous before it became popular and acceptable. I trust her most basic instinct as being right and exemplary. From a small town in Mississippi, she knew the hurtful challenges of responding to racism, but she responded. When people who wanted her to act like a good white male clergyman, like everybody is supposed to be, she showed them who she was and is. A loving white woman who wants no barriers risen in front of any woman, who wants the color of a person's skin to be only a natural pigment, not a cause of social prejudice, who wants poverty recognized as a sin, who hates injustice, and who, as a deeply committed Christian leader, seeks mutual understanding and cooperation with people in every religious tradition and no religious tradition. Jane embodies the best of the goals and the work of Interfaith Alliance, and does so with integrity akin to that of the man who for years was considered the most trusted man in America, Reverend Jane Holmes Dixon. Come over here first. Come over here with you.
Okay. One of the things that's happened to me as I have gotten older, and I am old, is that I tend to cry when people say nice things about me. So I may cry when I do this, but I want to thank my friend and hero, Welton Gaddy. We come out of that South that shaped us because it taught us to be different than we heard at home, not in our own homes, but in the world around us. Welton has been a mentor, a friend, a hero for me, and I want to say to him, to Dr. Gingrich, to the board of the Interfaith Alliance, that to have my name in the same sentence with Walter Cronkite is an honor indeed, something I never expected in my life. So thank you. And to be honored with another of my heroes, Jim Lara, is truly special. 30 years ago, when I was a student at the Virginia Theological Seminary with another friend who's here tonight, the Right Reverend Carolyn Tanner Irish, the former Bishop of Utah, there was a professor named Murray Newman. He taught the Hebrew Scriptures. And one of the courses that he taught was called The Bible in the New York Times. I took that course because I thought it might be helpful to me, and what he said to us was that every preacher who stands in a pulpit needs to look at the Scriptures and what's happening in the world today, and to see what those Scriptures say to the state of the world. It was wonderful and profound advice, and I have appreciated it. And 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, actually 19 years ago, when I was a nominee for suffragan or assistant bishop in the Diocese of Washington, D.C., we have what we call dog and pony shows. That's where those of us who are nominees go out and people have a chance to come and hear us speak and to ask us questions. And one of the questions one night was, could you tell us about your spiritual life? What are your spiritual practices? And so I think they were expecting something maybe more Ignatian or Benedictine, but I said my spiritual practices are that I pray every morning, I read the scripture because on Sunday night I begin to prepare for the sermon the next Sunday. I read the New York Times News Hour with Jim Lehrer. And that's the truth. I watch that program 5 nights a week when I can. I couldn't as much when I was working full-time, but I really do appreciate what's being said there, the civility, the conversations that go on. I miss you, Jim, and I'm always delighted on Friday night when you show up for a little bit. But there's another thing about the News Hour. It makes no difference who you are, whether you're male or female, whether you're black or white, whether you're Latino, or whether you are from another culture, you speak another language, you see yourself on television when you look at the News Hour. That makes a difference to me, and I thank you for that. Actually, my work with Interfaith began with my children, because when they were young and were bringing friends home from school, they really brought into my life for the first time Jewish friends. I grew up in this country town where there were 2 Jewish families, a parents and their daughter and her husband. I knew a few Jewish girls when I went to college, but not many. But my children went to school, and their friends, they didn't know what religion they were or what they weren't. But they came into our homes day after day after day, and it began to open my eyes to being in relationship of people who might believe somewhat differently from me. So I thank you. My 3 children are here tonight, and my son-in-law, and they honor me with their presence. That does make me cry. Because being in a world with people who believe differently, when I was rector of a small church out in Laurel, Maryland, during the time of Desert Storm, it became important to us in that community that we pray together. And so I'm going to brag on the Episcopal Church for a moment. You just have to put up with that. But the Episcopal Church and the people who worship there, the vestry, the governing board of that church, I went to them and I said, we need to have a prayer service where we have not only our Jewish sisters and brothers, but our Muslim sisters and brothers, our Baha'i sisters and brothers, our Hindu brothers and sisters, our Roman Catholic brothers and sisters, our Baptist brothers and sisters, all of us come together to pray that this desert storm will be ended. And so we did. And it was an important thing for me and continues to be that. When I was elected bishop and went to work for Ronald Haynes, who was the diocesan bishop, part of my work for him was doing the ecumenical and interfaith work. And that's how I came to know about the Interfaith Alliance. It was our son David, actually, who brought some people in the early formation of that to my office to talk to me about doing that. And I'm proud to say that the then presiding Bishop Edmund Browning was on the founding board of the Interfaith Alliance. And it was there that I met Mohammed Majid, an imam who is out in Dulles, Virginia, who has become a friend of mine, who continues to have me invited different places. And I found myself this past February at a meeting put on by the Brookings Institution and the country of Qatar, as we sat around a table and talked about how we could live together of people of faith. Now I want to talk a minute about the work that I've been able to do for the dignity and respect of human beings, particularly women. This is sexist, and you men will have to put up with it, but I'm going to blame it on my friend Diane Rehm. Because back in the 70s, George Washington University, in fact, these were taught at a lot of universities around the country, a course called Developing New Horizons for Women. And Diane was one of the first people to go to that, and that was the beginning of her wonderful life she has on the radio. But she called me up. We're friends from church. We've known each other for almost 50 years. She called me up one day and she said, "You got to take this course." And I said, why do I need to take this course? She said, you need to take this course because you need to be, just like you said, Shelley, you need to stand up as a single white, well, I wasn't single, I was a married white woman, but you got to stand up for yourself. Now, my husband called this course Women's Lib 101. And to some degree, it might have been. But at the center of my faith is a God who respects the dignity of every human being. And the words of the prophet Micah from the Hebrew Scriptures, when the prophet says, "And what does the Lord require but to do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly with your God?" I can stand here and say tonight that my daughter and my 2 daughters-in-law have managed to find their way in the world where they have family, they have friends, they have children, and they have their professional lives. And I think they're able to hold their heads up in ways that they didn't have to go through some of the struggles that some of us have taken. And to commend my sons and my son-in-law, they're not very threatened men because they chose or were chosen by these strong women. And I have to tell you, straight white men who are not threatened are few and far between. That's just my experience. And then my introduction to my gay and lesbian brothers and sisters actually came from my mother in Winona, Mississippi in the 40s. We're always saying, oh, well, somebody is my friend. I know them because they're my friend. But my mother grew up with a man who finally came out or came together for himself with his partner. And they came to our home. And I can remember my mother taking my father to the bathroom, which is where she always took him to tell him things he really needed to hear. And she said to him, Kenneth is coming with his friend, and I expect you to be nice. Don't be ugly. That was her worst thing. Don't be ugly. And so it's interesting to me that as a young girl in the 40s in Mississippi, in my own home, these 2 men were treated with dignity and respect. And so when I went to seminary in the late 70s and early 80s, when you're in Virginia, when you're in the Episcopal seminary and you get ready to be ordained, they give you an examination. It's not as bad as the bar exam, but it's pretty tough, called the General Ordination Exam, and there's 7 different areas that you have to be proficient in. Well, I took those, and my son Edward used to ask me about my grades all the time. It was just awful to compare grades with Edward Dixon. But anyway, they flunked me on ethics and moral theology. And I've always thought they flunked me because I had taken a positive stand on the ordination of gay and lesbian people. In fact, I appealed the decision. But the point is, I was ready to go to the standing committee who had to pass me for ordination and really give them a hard time. And one of the great mentors of my life, Dr. Verna Dozier, said to me, you better behave yourself, because if you don't, you'll never be in a position to stand with your gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. How right she was, because some years later, when I was president of the standing committee of the Diocese of Washington, the first female priest, lesbian woman in a committed relationship, was to be ordained. And there was quite a discernment in the Episcopal Church. I can assure you, people were worried about givers. Were they going to take back their money from the cathedral and this, that, and the other? And I was able to stand with the then Bishop of Washington, Ronald Haynes, who had the courage to ordain her. So all of these things have come together in my life. People who have been there when I needed them to show me the way. And the one, of course, who took me by the hand 51 years ago, David Dixon. When we were at Vanderbilt, he was a law student, and I was graduating from undergraduate school. And I've always said that Dixie has the Bible in one hand and the Constitution in the other. And we stood on the perimeters of the civil rights movement. We had to move to Washington to get far enough away to really live into what we believed about our faith. And he is the one who stands by me, and when things get tough, he's always there. He doesn't like me to talk too long, so I have to hush. But I want to thank him tonight, because he did, in fact, take me literally by the hand and say, this is the right thing to do. And you are given the opportunity to be a voice for those right now who don't have a voice. Someone has had a voice for you, so stand up and be brave. I love you. Thank you all. It's been wonderful.